My name is Claire. It's been a while since that fateful engagement dinner, but the memory still feels as fresh as if it happened yesterday. I was sitting in a coffee shop, the November afternoon light casting a gray hue over the table. Across from me sat Lily, my cousin Ethan's fiancée. She looked haggard, her hands tightly wrapped around a mug, and she blurted out, "I owe you an apology." Multiple ones, actually. As I listened to her, my mind drifted back to that evening. I was in my apartment on a Thursday night, still in my work clothes, munching on leftover pasta straight from the container. My phone buzzed, and it was my cousin, Stella. Her text read, "Don't forget Saturday, 7 p.m. At the Rosewood Grand. Dress to impress." I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. Ethan was getting engaged, and his fiancée, Lily, had planned this fancy dinner. I heard about it from my aunt, as Ethan rarely called me directly anymore. Once close as kids, our relationship had drifted over the years. I typed back, "I'll be there," then set my phone aside and finished my pasta. What nobody at that dinner knew was that I co-owned the building they were in. My business partner, Ryan, and I had acquired it 14 months ago through our real estate investment firm, Crestview Investments. It was an 18-story building, and the Rosewood Grand had a commercial lease on floors 2 through 5. We kept a low profile, there was no sign with my name anywhere, and the restaurant staff only knew our company. When I walked into the Rosewood Grand in my black dress with my hair up, I was just the quiet cousin from out of town. According to family lore, I'd struggled after college, moving around a lot and never really getting my life together. They weren't entirely wrong, but they were off by about 6 years. I easily found the private dining room, the orchid room, the second door on the left past the bar. I'd approved a renovation quote for this room 8 months ago, and the soft blue wallpaper was my idea. Seeing it brought a strange smile to my face. The room was already full of about 30 people, divided between Ethan's side and Lily's side. They were seated around a long rectangular table with candles and white lilies. My Aunt Grace waved from across the room, and my Uncle Henry gave me a nod. I found an empty seat near the middle, set my bag down, and smiled at the woman next to me. "You must be family," she said. "Ethan's cousin." "I'm Claire," I replied. "Oh," she said, smiling blankly. "Lily's mentioned the family. Are you the one who lives in Seattle?" "I'm based in San Francisco now," I told her. She nodded and turned back to her bread plate. I looked down the table and saw Ethan, flushed and happy, with his arm around Lily. She was stunning, with long brown hair and bright red earrings, exuding an effortless confidence. I'd only met her a couple of times briefly at family gatherings, where I was always on the periphery while she was the center of attention. She caught me looking and gave me a polite smile. Dinner started, and the food was excellent. The conversation around me was typical of family events, filled with small talk about jobs, cities, and how long people were in town. I answered when asked and asked questions in return. Then, Lily's mother, Mrs. Harper, started talking about real estate. It seemed to come out of nowhere. Someone mentioned San Francisco, and then home prices, and suddenly, she was holding court. "Real estate is the only honest way to build wealth," she declared. "Everything else, like stocks and crypto, is just speculation." My Aunt Grace piped up from down the table, "Claire's in San Francisco. Maybe she knows the market there." Mrs. Harper looked at me. "Oh. What do you do, Claire?" "I work in commercial real estate," I said. "Oh, how interesting," she said, with a tone that suggested it wasn't really that interesting. "Is it more on the leasing side or administrative?" "Investment and acquisitions, mostly," I replied. She nodded in that way people do when they think what you're saying isn't very impressive. "Well, it's a good industry, even at an entry level. The exposure is valuable." I was 32, and I hadn't been entry level for 5 years, but I just said, "Absolutely," and reached for my wine. That's when Lily leaned forward. She'd been half listening, like someone at the center of a party with conversations pulling at her from all directions. "Wait," she said. "Ethan, isn't this the cousin who? Didn't you say she had to borrow money from your mom a few years back for rent?" The people around us went quiet. It was true. 6 years ago, I'd borrowed $1,000 from Aunt Grace because I was between jobs, and my landlord was threatening to evict me. I'd paid her back within 4 months and was always grateful. But once something like that becomes part of family mythology, it seems to stay there forever. Ethan looked uncomfortable and said, "That was a long time ago." "Oh, I'm not judging," Lily said, in a tone that clearly showed she was. "We all go through rough patches. It must be hard watching everyone else settle down. You'll get there." I was silent for a second. "Thank you." "That's kind," I said. She stared at me, waiting for me to break, but I just smiled and reached for my bread. Then I heard her whisper to her mother, "Ethan said she's always been the family charity case." I thought about leaving. It would have been so easy. My coat was on the back of my chair, and I could have slipped out in seconds. But I thought about Aunt Grace, who'd given me that money without hesitation. I thought about Ethan, who used to call me on my birthday even when I was broke and hard to reach. So, I stayed. I talked to Uncle Henry about his retirement and to a woman named Zoe, Lily's college roommate, who was really funny and seemed oblivious to the drama at the other end of the table. I ate my steak and had 1 glass of wine, then switched to water because I was driving. When dessert arrived, Lily stood up to make a toast. She was good at it. She talked about Ethan, how she'd known from their first date that he was special, and how she'd never believed in soulmates until she'd spent 3 years with him. People were in tears, and I felt a tightening in my chest, not because of her words but because of the look on Ethan's face as he listened to her. Then, she said something unplanned. "I want to thank everyone who made tonight possible. This venue, this dinner, it's not cheap, and we couldn't have done it without the people in our corner." She looked directly at me. "Success isn't handed to anyone. Ethan and I have worked incredibly hard for everything we have, and that's something we're proud of." Just then, my phone buzzed in my bag. It was Ryan. The message said, "Hey, did you know the Rosewood Grand double-billed the plumbing service on our Q4 invoice? Also, there's a sketchy LLC in Suite 12007. Call me when you can." I looked at the message, at Lily accepting congratulations from her mother, and at the blue wallpaper I'd chosen. I typed back, "Give me an hour. Pull all the info on the commercial tenants in the building." Then I put my phone away and finished my dessert. After dinner, I found a quiet corner near the window and called Ryan. He answered right away. "Tell me about Suite 12007, I said. "Okay," he said, and I could hear him pulling up files. "It's listed as a consulting firm, Alpha Advisory Group, but there's no website, no LinkedIn presence, and no recent Secretary of State filings. They signed a 2-year lease through a broker, not directly with us. So, they slipped through our tenant vetting. They've been in the building for 14 months, almost since we acquired it." "Who's the lease signatory?" I asked. "A guy named Max Thompson, but here's the thing, Claire. This Max Thompson doesn't seem to exist. No social media, no professional history, no valid address. But the lease has a guarantor. It's a woman named..." He paused. "Isabella Harper." My heart skipped a beat. Mrs. Harper, who'd been sitting just a few feet away from me all evening, preaching about real estate as the only honest way to build wealth. "Ryan, I need you to get our attorney on the phone first thing tomorrow," I said. "Already on my list," he replied. "How are you? Aren't you at a family thing?" "I'm at Ethan's engagement dinner. His fiancée's mother is the guarantor of our mystery tenant," I said. There was a moment of silence. "You're kidding me," he said. "I'm not. Go home, pull the files. I'll call you in the morning." I hung up and looked out the window at the parking lot. The streetlights were on, and it was cold enough to see my breath on the glass. I went back inside and found Aunt Grace near the entrance putting on her coat. "There you are," she said. "I thought you'd left." "I just stepped out to make a work call," I told her. "Work thing?" she asked, looking at me with that knowing look she'd had since I was a kid. "You okay, sweetheart?" "I'm good, Grace." "Did Ethan ever mention anything about Lily's family, her mother's business?" She thought for a moment. "Isabella? She's in consulting, I think." "Why?" "Just curious." "She was talking about real estate at dinner." "She talks about money a lot," Aunt Grace said carefully. "But Lily's lovely. I think she's good for Ethan." "I think so, too," I said honestly. She squeezed my arm. "Don't let tonight bother you. You know how these things go." "I know," I replied. Before I left, I found Ethan at the bar. He looked a bit guilty. "It's fine," I said. "It wasn't fine, Claire." "She shouldn't have said that," he said. I put my hand on his arm. "I'm genuinely happy for you. She's clearly crazy about you, and you light up when you look at her. That's what matters." He exhaled. "Yeah, it really is. I'll call you next week." I hugged him and meant it. Then I got my coat and went home. The next few days were filled with work. Our attorney, Miss Lewis, a no-nonsense woman with 25 years of experience in commercial property law, pulled the lease and LLC documentation. What she found was clear. Alpha Advisory Group had been used to route payments from 3 different clients in industries that required disclosure, obscuring their identities. The lease was obtained through a broker who'd since moved to another state, and Mrs. Harper's signature as a guarantor was legally binding. She signed a fraudulent commercial lease as an individual, which means she has direct personal liability, Ms. Lewis told me on the phone. "What are my options?" I asked. "Immediate lease termination for breach of the non-disclosure clause, demand for back rent at the correct rate, and referral to the DA's office for the routing scheme. The DA referral will happen once the filing hits the city's commercial records review, whether you're involved or not." "The DA's office?" I repeated. "Commercial fraud in the state is a third-degree felony when the amounts exceed a certain threshold, and they do," she said. I sat there for a moment, thinking about Ethan and Lily. Ms. Lewis, my cousin is engaged to this woman's daughter. She was silent for a second. "I know. I'm sorry. If Lily wasn't involved in the business arrangements, she won't be implicated legally." "Okay, move forward," I said. The notice of lease termination went out on a Tuesday, and the DA referral happened as predicted. I called Ethan on Wednesday evening. He answered right away, which told me he'd already heard something. "Claire," he said. "I know," I replied. There was a long silence. "Is it true that your firm owns the building where the engagement dinner was held?" he asked. "Yes, and others. We've owned it for 14 months, I said. He exhaled slowly. "She didn't know, Claire. Lily didn't know anything about this." "I believe you, Ethan. This was a business decision. I can't run a building where someone is using space for financial fraud, no matter who's involved." "I know," he said quietly. I waited until I heard him breathe. "I'm sorry this is happening to you." "Yeah, I know you are," he said, his voice rough. We talked for an hour about Lily, how she'd driven to her mother's apartment and come back not speaking, and how Ethan didn't know what to do. I just listened. 2 weeks later, I was in my office when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It said, "This is Lily. I got your number from Ethan. Can we talk in person?" I stared at the text for a minute, then typed, "Yes. Name a time." And that's how I ended up in this coffee shop, listening to Lily apologize. She said she'd been showing off at the dinner and that she didn't really think of me as a charity case. She also assured me that she didn't know about her mother's business with the building. I believed her. I told her that if she'd known, she wouldn't have made a scene at the dinner. She asked if I'd known about her mother's involvement at the dinner, and I told her I'd found out after her toast. I finished my dessert, I said, and she let out a short, startled laugh. She then asked if I thought Ethan would be okay. He will be, I said. He's been through harder things. Give him time. I also told her that I thought she was good for Ethan, even after everything. She left first, and I sat there, sipping my coffee and watching the street get dark. I thought about the $1,000 Aunt Grace had lent me, and how it had followed me like a shadow. I thought about all the years I'd made myself small in family gatherings, not because I was weak but because it was easier. And I thought about Mrs. Harper, who'd talked about real estate with such authority, not knowing she was standing on ground I'd built. My phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Thanks for talking to her. She came home different. I typed back, she's good, Ethan. Give her a chance. He sent back a small heart emoji. I put my phone in my pocket and drove home in the quiet. I knew that the long game had paid off. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just quiet, true, and completely enough.